Greetings, comrades! Almost a year and a half has passed since February 2022, and nowadays you can find two opinions on the internet about what is going on inside Russia. One is that we are on the verge of a coup, or civil war, or total collapse. The economy is plummeting, industry is frozen, stores are empty, and people are fighting for the last piece of sausage. Others will say that sanctions have done Russia nothing but good. The departure of Western companies has given way to domestic production. People have united around one national idea, and Russia is rapidly moving towards a brighter future. Well, let's discuss what has changed in Russia over the past year and a half, and what has remained the same. Before I begin, 2 points. First, I will still refer to the conflict in Ukraine as a special military operation. As far as I know, it is now kinda allowed to use the three-letter word to describe it in Russia, but I'm already used to the old variant. Secondly, I want to clarify, I'm not going to do some deep political or economic analysis. I'm not going to claim that here you can see that GDP fell by 4.45%, but Putin's ratings rose by 2.24%, which means that no, don't expect any comprehensive insights from this video. I will simply talk about how life has changed around me from the perspective of me, the average person living in Russia. You can believe it, you cannot, again, these are only feelings and personal experiences of one person, not some immutable truth. In addition, all this is relevant right now, in May 2023, and in a month, theoretically, everything can change dramatically. And yes, I will talk about the bad things as well as the good things. Or not really the good things, but the ones that remain the same contrary to popular belief. In the comments to other videos I have already been called both a Kremlin sleazeball and a foreign agent receiving money directly from the White House. Let's see if I can combine both of these alter egos in one video. Well, let's start with the positives, shall we? Russia is still the biggest country in the world. The Kremlin is still in place, bears are still walking the streets. Okay, joking aside, it's safe to say that all the predictions about a rapid collapse of Russia's economy and social sphere were wrong.
This was wrong. That's just totally wrong. This was not true. This was not true.
The Russian economy was predicted to plummet by 12 or even 15% in 2022, but in reality it was only 2%. Yes, it is strange to be proud of the downturn in the economy, but under such conditions, things could be worse. Gas is still pumping through pipelines. Russian oil, in 2022 our close friends from the Baltics used to blend it with something to get a sanction-free substance, but now it simply goes to India. As an employee of a state-owned organization, I can say that salaries are paid on time, and they have even been indexed twice in the last year to compensate for inflation. The ruble, after the impressive fall of March 2022, returned to its more or less comfortable level against the dollar. That is, the country at least is not collapsing before my eyes. How does an ordinary person determine his well-being? By what and how much he can buy in the stores. And here everything is also relatively smooth. Yes, prices have risen, but they have been rising for the last 10 years. There's nothing new here, no critical leap. Yes, some brands have disappeared from the shelves. Some have changed their names or completely moved production to Russia, but I, for example, still eat donuts from Poland, granola from the Czech Republic and frozen vegetables from France. And some people have never bought such products, so not much has changed for them at all. McDonald's? Tasty and period. KFC? It's Rostix now, like 20 years ago. Coca-Cola? Is the same cola, just a little worse. Things are a little more complicated with clothing and technology brands, but even here the situation is very ambiguous. Yes, Adidas and Uniqlo closed their stores, H&M left the market and Zara sold its business. But in fact, anyone who really wants to dress there can now buy the same things through resellers on the internet. Yes, it is more expensive, but it is not so noticeable against the background of inflation, which was already constant. It's the same with technology, for example with cell phones. All manufacturers except Chinese have officially suspended shipments to Russia. So guess which manufacturer became the best seller in Russia in 2022? Apple. And in second place is Samsung. And I may be wrong, but MacBooks are now almost cheaper than they were a year and a half ago in the official stores. Yes, there is a problem with the manufacturer's warranty, but there are ones from local service centers. Or again, a personal example, I've been using smartphones from Google for 10 years now, and this fall I've decided once again to change it. The new Pixel was in Russia 3 days after its world premiere, and it only cost 10 to 15% more than everywhere else. And that is despite the fact that previously Google phones had not been officially supplied to Russia at all, and you had to find loopholes with ordering from abroad. And that's pretty much how it is in all areas. Yes, a little more expensive, yes, with some inconveniences, but in general, you can live like before, practically without changing anything. Stores are full of groceries, shopping malls are full of people, there is no lack of entertainment, even vacations in Turkey or Egypt are still available to you without so many problems, except that now it's better to bring cash with you, like 10 years ago. Unemployment in Russia has even decreased, according to official data it's 3.7%. Yes, this includes mobilized and contracted military personnel, but no one I know has been fired or gone bankrupt. Most major enterprises continue to work. Moreover, during this year, we as a research laboratory and our neighbors at the institute were approached by a dozen different commercial startups that came to us with basically the same words. Look guys, before our market was occupied by foreign manufacturers. Now they have left and we want to take over this market. And you've been doing some research in this area, so let's work together. This is quite normal at any time, but now the number of such people has increased manifold. That is, some people see this time not as a time of crisis, but as a time of opportunity, including opportunities to organize new businesses and new industries. To be honest, I don't really believe that in a year or two they will be able to create production facilities that will completely replace the products of foreign brands that have left. But it is possible that some of these startups will succeed and contribute to the development of the Russian economy. For example, quite a few new Russian cosmetics and clothing brands have already appeared. And by the way, they are advertised by the same influencers from the band Instagram, who quietly continue their activities either there or in VK and feel fine. Or YouTubers. They still make videos for YouTube, only now they insert more ad integration into the video itself, instead of ads from YouTube, which have been disabled for Russian viewers, and people are happy about this. Or they just switch to a foreign audience like TikTokers. As a last resort, you can always go to Dubai and still shoot commercials for some brand that has officially left Russia. So this sphere is also relatively fine. Now about the obvious, the outflow of people. In two directions, abroad and through mobilization. To be honest, none of my close acquaintances have moved out of the country permanently. It is probably just a coincidence, but still, zero. Now about mobilization. I'm not the most sociable person, but let's say I know 200 men of the right age. 3 of them ended up at the front. 1, 30 years, went there for ideological reasons after the announcement of mobilization. 2, 55, was a former contract serviceman who was supposed to retire soon but didn't. And another 60 went to the front as a volunteer after he was fired from his job for inappropriate behavior. 3 people out of 200. Yes, of course, much depends on the region, Moscow and its suburbs are quite prosperous, and on the social circle. It would be weird if all the scientists went to the front, but still. For the average Russian, the special military operation is still some distant thing that does not affect his daily life too much. And even if it does, it is not so critical. Yes, life is a little worse, but bearable.
Not great, not terrible.
And now about the negatives, and we will dwell mainly on the same points that were in the pluses, but from the other side. Yes, the drop in GDP is only 2%, and inflation is only about the same as in the past 10 years. But people would still like GDP to grow, not to fall, and inflation to be close to 0, not 12%. Besides, the sanctions are long-term. How long will the slow decline last? 5 years? 10? 30 like Iran? Or, for example, the same parallel imports. First of all, it is still more expensive than before 90% of the time. And yes, it works for phones, but what about cars, for example? All the big factories are mothballed or sold to Chinese brands. You want a new car? You have a choice, either Chinese cars or the magnificent Lada Granta. Or, of course, you can order any car from abroad individually. whatever you want, and it won't even be much more expensive than before. For example, last summer there was a popular scheme to import Toyota Land Cruiser 300 and Mitsubishi Pajero from Dubai, and the options were good and the prices were not too high. Have you guessed where the catch is? Yes, the cars for the Arabian market usually have no heated steering wheel, seats, windshield or anything else. Plus, the problems with servicing the car. The warranty from the manufacturer seems to be preserved, but the original parts are twice as expensive and are not always available. There are also problems with simpler things. Yes, I can still order Adidas sneakers as before, but I will either have to pay 10 to 15% to middlemen and wait a month till they arrive, or pay the same middlemen who have already brought these sneakers to Russia in advance and endure their markup of up to 200%. And can I be absolutely sure it won't be some Chinese fake? Or let's talk about online services. Yes, Netflix is easily replaced by Kinopoisk and Spotify by Yandex Music. These are great services that are almost as good as their counterparts, but new music album releases sometimes don't appear there, and old movies disappear because the right holders revoke licenses. Not to mention the software market, where it has become virtually impossible to buy a lot of stuff legally. However, piracy in Russia is almost a national treasure. Or the situation in the market for vaccines and rare medications, which have disappeared because foreign manufacturers have stopped supplying them, but the products themselves are too rare to be profitable to be imported in mass through parallel imports. Yes, there is no shortage of vital drugs, but for example, I want to be vaccinated against chickenpox. And it's not available in many cities. The vaccine came from Belgium, and no one wants to bring it in for me alone. Will I die without this vaccine? No, but it's still inconvenient. Even with the same import substitution, let's say by some miracle Russia manages to replace absolutely everything, but is it good for me as an ordinary customer? No, because in the absence of competition, domestic producers will have little incentive to make high-quality goods and to reduce prices. And it's always better to have the ability to choose between 10 analogs than the only option but domestic. Not to mention the complex equipment with unique technologies, the production of which cannot be simply set up in a year or two. Now about unemployment. The number of 3.7% is good, but let's look at the flip side. Even according to official data, about 500,000 people left Russia, and 300,000 more were mobilized. If you are not used to believing in the official data, add more. Plus the demographic hole of the 90s, resulting in the fact that in some areas of Russia now there is a catastrophic shortage of the working age population. Yes, some male professions are being filled by women, and some HRs start taking applicants of older age, but this does not solve the problem. There are already not a lot of people in Russia, especially men, especially those aged 25 to 40, the most productive age. So how do you solve this problem? Nobody knows. Let's talk about those who left. It is no secret that most of the people who left were pro-opposition, young, relatively wealthy residents of large cities. And many do not see this as a problem, saying that the Russian land has just been cleansed of traitors, or point to the fact that representatives of not the most valuable professions have left. For example, some tattoo masters or video bloggers from that damned Moscow. On the one hand, yes, if all the tattoo artists leave Moscow, it is not as bad as if all the dentists leave. But they are still representatives of that very productive age, who make a serious contribution to the economy at least by spending the money their clients bring them. And now they will contribute to the economy of Georgia, Armenia, Turkey and other countries. And I took tattoo artists not accidentally. I heard a story from one big enough Moscow tattoo salon where not one, not two, but all masters at once just left the country. And yes, in this situation most likely it will be for the worse for both parties. But it's not just tattoo artists who are leaving. Scientists, journalists, programmers after all. A programmer earns good money. He can work from his apartment in Moscow, or from a village near Saratov, or from a beach in Thailand. Will the departure of a large number of young and talented specialists definitely not be a problem for the domestic IT sphere? Now about the cultural sphere. I rarely see much emphasis on this, but it seems to me that things are headed to disaster. For a year and a half now the cinemas have been surviving only God knows how, showing Russian films, old movies for which they have the rights, or illegally importing copies of new films. Theater is split in two halves. Some actors are fired for taking the wrong position, other actors demand punishment for all traitors. Performances are cancelled, theaters are closing, or the music scene. A huge number of popular artists have left the country. Many of them have openly spoken out against the special military operation. They are not going to return to the country and are organizing tours in Europe and the United States. But how many fans do they have in these countries? How long can they live away from the homeland? Is it easy to create in a foreign land? Others haven't left, but they are on the list of artists whose concerts are undesirable at the moment. And of the patriotic stars who rose in 2022, there is only Shaman with his song about how Russian he is. Cool, but one Shaman is unlikely to replace 50 artists and really top artists who have left the country. Again, some people see this as purging the traitors, but what if after the purge is over it will turn out that there is actually no one left? And finally, something that is hard to express in numbers, but which has really worsened this year. I mean the reduction of freedoms and the general feeling of depression. It is no secret that the government has seriously tightened the screws this year. The crackdown on the liberal media, the new laws on foreign agents and fake news about the army, more monitoring of social networks, detention at rallies, thousands of administrative and criminal cases, no TikTok and banning Instagram, constant proposals to block Wikipedia, YouTube and everything else. In the past, some criticism of the state was tolerated, such as the relatively liberal Echo Moskvy or Novaya Gazeta, which operated until 2022. But now there is at least one topic, any public discussion of which can be interpreted as a violation of the law. Or may not be interpreted. Just listen to the head of a well-known PMC and his statements about the defense minister or the head of the general staff. And tell me these statements don't contain enough things for about 10 legal cases of discrediting the army. The average person just does not understand what is allowed and what is not, especially when they see the news about a Muscovite being arrested and fined for listening to Ukrainian music in his car, which incidentally was condemned by Vladimir Putin himself, reminding that in some subjects of Russia the Ukrainian language is the state language, and it should not be done this way. But this did not cancel the arrest and fine. Consequently, people are afraid to talk about anything at all. Even sociologists complain that in telephone service 90% of people simply hang up when something near political is discussed. As a result, the atmosphere in society is far from ideal. It is not for nothing that sociologists recorded an increase in the anxiety of the population to 70% last September. Think about it, 70% of the population lives with constant stress. It's not normal. And I can see it in my own eyes too. Yes, someone might say that I am too sensitive, but I don't remember such an anxious atmosphere on the streets probably not since the early 2000s. Back then, there was an obvious reason for that. You were working home in the evenings and didn't know what you were going to see on TV. Would terrorists take hostages again? Would they blow up a house, a subway station, an airplane? Now, as I said, nothing seems to have changed for the average person. Life goes on as before, but something is still wrong. Either it's the effect of an increased social divide, yes, I definitely don't see any unity around a common idea, or the uncertainty of the future, or unfulfilled expectations. Everyone wanted to finally see rapid growth, but instead we were once again asked to suffer a little more for the sake of the greater good. But if you ask me what has changed most in Russia, I will say the atmosphere, and not for the better. Thanks for watching, guys. As always, a huge shout out to my biggest supporters on Patreon: Steak221, Steven, Yelizaveta Zakharova, Kirill Klimuk, Zeman Berze and Jordan Lamotte. See you guys next time.